truth is the most convincing story that maps onto reality, and that's why the central narrative is falling apart.
Right now in the United States, people should not be walking around with masks.
We must see the central narrative for the fiction that it is. We are Americans.
While elections are sometimes messy, this was a secure election.
The founders began the fight for human liberty and self-governance, and it's up to us to finish the job.
I'll tell you what, we are in a truth emergency right now.
This is the end game.
And we will make America great again. Thank you, Wisconsin. Thank you, Wisconsin. Thank you.
Well, all righty then. So that was a pretty efficient, high-energy speech by Trump. He has a lot going on today. I guess he's going to Milwaukee, I think he said. People in the chat have been saying he's headed to Michigan later today as well. So big day off from filming Law and Order New York, the loudest hush money. Quite an episode playing out in New York, and taking a day off from filming that television show to come campaign in the 2024 fake election. Very enjoyable, high energy, fun speech. That clocked in, I guess, at an hour. I think he was supposed to start at 3 Eastern. Usually he starts like a half an hour or more late. So I think he just got that going immediately. Thank you guys all for hanging out for that. For whoever might have dropped in to hear me and instead heard Trump and got upset about it, if there were any of those people, then I guess I apologize. I don't know. It's kind of a catch-22 there, isn't it? Okay, so what did Trump talk about? I brought up, maybe we can go through some of this just briefly. I don't know that we need to go deep into any of it because I've certainly talked about a lot of it plenty of times. He's talking about the abortion issue. That is one of the very few things that Democrats think that they actually are going to, or I should say the uniparty left in particular, but the uniparty generally is trying to provide some way to explain how it would even be possible that Joe Biden could potentially win an election this fall. And I guess they think abortion is the issue that they can do that on. Ralph Northam is the poster child for Democrat cruelty when it comes to their systematic child sacrifice for the benefit of the pharmaceutical industry and obviously their goal to live forever as they create a false god of the false reality. Ralph Northam, as most of you know, claimed on a radio show that we would have to wait until the baby was fully born if an abortion failed and then decide what to do with it. And I might as well include this because a lot of people kind of don't really understand how real this was. So let me wait a second here. Let me make sure I can share this for everyone. This guy is as creepy as they come. He was also the governor of Virginia who was found to have taken pictures at a college fraternity party or something. He and a friend of his went dressed, one in a Klan robe and hood, and the other in full body paint and what they call blackface. So it was a Klansman and apparently a black slave. That was a very cool Halloween costume, apparently in the 1970s. And Ralph Northam was absolutely crushing it in his Halloween costume. Let's go to the video of him on a radio show talking about his position on abortion and abortion timing. Let me see. Where did I lose this? There we are.
No exception. There was a very contentious committee hearing yesterday when Fairfax County Delegate Kathy Tran made her case for lifting restrictions on third trimester abortions, as well as other restrictions now in place. And she was pressed by a Republican delegate about whether her bill would permit an abortion, even as a woman is essentially dilating, ready to give birth. And she answered that it would permit an abortion at that stage of labor. Do you support her measure and explain her answer?
Yeah, and I wasn't there, Julie, and I certainly can't speak for Delegate Tran, but I would tell you first thing I would say is this is why decisions such as this should be made by providers, physicians, and the mothers and fathers that are involved. There are, when we talk about third trimester abortions, these are done with the consent of obviously the mother, with the consent of the physicians, more than one physician, by the way. And it's done in cases where there may be severe deformities. There may be a fetus that's non-viable. So in this particular example, if a mother is in labor, I can tell you exactly what would happen. The infant would be delivered. The infant would be kept comfortable. The infant would be resuscitated if that's what the mother and the family desired. And then a discussion would ensue between the physicians and the mother. So I think this was really blown out of proportion. But again, we want the government not to be involved in these types of decisions. We want the decision to be made by the mothers and their providers. And this is why, Julie, that legislators, most of whom are men, by the way, shouldn't be telling a woman what she should and shouldn't be doing with her body.
And do you think multiple physicians should have to weigh in as is currently required? She's trying to lift that requirement.
Well, I think it's always good to get a second opinion and for at least two providers to be involved in that decision, because these decisions shouldn't be taken lightly. And so, I would certainly support more than one provider.
All right, let's go back.
Okay, so that is the clip Trump was referring to. Anytime you see a fact check on that issue, you can know that whoever is doing the fact check is lying blatantly to your faces. That is what he said. That was what made news. I guess it was 5 years ago or so. And that is obviously not an acceptable answer by any standard. It also isn't a truthful one. And as someone who spent, most of my life as someone who would be a Democrat voter, I heard all the pro-life arguments and pro-abortion arguments and made some of them myself. And part of that was because I was under the illusion that what Ralph Northam was saying here about these kind of unusual, unique, rare, fringe situations, I accepted that at face value, that he was describing something rare. And I think that that's what a lot of Democrats tell themselves about the things they are hearing. Issues like when people talk about pedophilia, for instance. I've talked about this on the show before. A lot of people have the tendency to believe this is a problem with someone's creepy uncle or an ex-convict in a rusty white van outside a children's playground. And I think that sort of thing doesn't really happen very often. Well, that sort of thing probably happens a lot more often than people imagine, but that's also not the real root of what that problem is. Same as the abortion issue. It's entirely separate from these isolated cases that involve one person committing one isolated act of evil. There is systemic evil that underlies all this stuff. And part of the obfuscation of that is that politicians like Ralph Northam reroute these things to make it seem like these are isolated issues where one person is having a unique problem and a special exception needs to be made for that person. But it isn't something that happens on any regular basis. So it's not something that policy should be made to prohibit. And of course, that is the absolute wrong way to view these things. If the science needs fetal tissue from fetuses that are 8 months old or older, or needs tissue from a fetus or baby that is older than that, that is what they aim to provide. And there are various bills, legislation that has been on the table in places around the country, but most particularly California, that allows what they call perinatal abortion. And that includes up to 6 weeks after the birth in situations like Ralph Northam is discussing, or in situations where they just go ahead and take the life of a tiny baby. And to suspect that doesn't happen is to get something seriously wrong about what these people are trying to do and what the purposes for all of this really are. You also got to think about what's happening with these women who are coming across the border, especially considering, we hear some of the statistics that say a half, and in some cases, maybe even 75% of the women and girls who make that journey are sexually assaulted during that journey. It is entirely possible that many of them are impregnated. And it is entirely possible that those women who were impregnated as a result of this systematic abuse maybe feel a certain way about having a kid and caring for that kid under those circumstances. And they get offered money by the people who are there to take care of them and place them in homes in the United States of America. And they are then willing to give up these children. And if they are incentivized to carry them later into the term, there is no reason to believe that doesn't happen. All of that is entirely plausible. All of that suits an agenda we already know they have. So there is no reason to suspect that doesn't happen. I can't go ahead and prove to you from their sources that problem is widespread. But the fact is that every other system we have allows for that sort of thing to happen. And the commitment and passion of these people in supporting those systems should indicate that that their aims are not all pure. They're not all about protecting the life of the mother or victims of rape or sexual assault or the rest of it. He even mentions severe physical deformities. That is something that could be discovered long before carrying a pregnancy to term. And I'm not even saying that should be a situation for abortion either. But what I am trying to illustrate is that these people's explanations are absolute nonsense. We can get into some other stuff Trump talked about, but maybe let's go ahead and look at some comments from the Substack. I know there were some questions as well in the Rumble chat before we even got started on the Trump speech, but then things kind of got out of control over there. Lance asked, any new merchandise designs on the way for the election? I don't know that any of them will relate to the election directly, but I definitely have some new designs in mind. I am not a graphic designer, so sometimes those take me longer than they should. I've certainly thought of a number of concepts that I would like to produce and execute, and when I am able to do those will be up at cancelcouture.com. Luke I Cam or Lucky Cam or Lukey Cam. I don't know what your name is, Luke. I'm going to go with Luke. Says, with my 19-year-old son, he watched the election get stolen and has given up. These young kids are dooming out. Any suggestions? Yeah, I mean, I guess, I'm not friends with 19-year-olds, so I can't tell you from firsthand experience what exactly they're thinking. But, by way of the job that I did while I was still in Hollywood, I was regularly around people in their early 20s and was exposed to a constant stream of pop culture. I was very present and active on Instagram, which is kind of the hub for a lot of this. Now, of course, TikTok and to some degree, Snapchat. The thing that I would say about dooming always for everyone is if you are in that situation and that is how you are feeling, change your information flow, change your information habits. With a proper amount of attention paid and a proper understanding of what we are going through and the stage we are at, if you have any faith in your life, just focus on that and you're gonna make it through. If you are awake and you are paying attention to things, the more information you take in to find out what is actually happening right now, I think the better off you're going to be. But it's only if you are taking in information by people who are trying in good faith to tell you what is really going on. If you are taking in information that is tracking the central narrative and you are on their timeline, you are going to be unhappy because their job is to keep you divided from their controlled opposition in the uniparty left media. You are going to be fighting against those retards all day long. And you are going to think that those people can somehow win. And they are going to express to you that the other side is nearly as big as we are. Oh, Joe Biden, he might make a comeback in the polls this week. Oh, look, Joe Biden's getting closer to Trump in these polls. Everything is happening around the world. It's all so bad. There's wars in the Middle East. There's immigration on our border. Well, this is an information problem, and it is an information exposure problem. The problems on our border were necessarily worse before Trump got there. Then they got better while Trump was there. The wall was being built. They tried to say that Trump was a racist and basically Hitler for his policies on the border. Trump talked about the most massive deportation operation of all time. I suspect he will be doing that. I think that a lot of this stuff probably we are being relayed this information on a delayed informational timeline. These problems are being talked about primarily by mainstream media outlets and uniparty politicians who failed to discuss these problems for years and years while we knew these problems were going on and while MAGA was talking about them. And so now the mainstream picks up all these problems. Now they are willing to talk about them because they are hoping to find political advantage. They want legislation, which always revolves around spending packages. They want all that pushed through Congress however they can. And they tell us that's going to fix things. That is not going to fix things. These problems have existed for a long time. The people who are making these problems sound like they're enormous are liars always. So blackpilling and dooming out over what they are telling us is pointless. And then when influencers take what they're telling us and try to dramatize it and create viral content out of that stuff, they are making it even worse. They thrive on people's misunderstandings. They thrive on people's fears and anger. So if those things are being stoked, those are going to be the roots of blackpilling and dooming. And it's not necessary. And you can look at all this stuff. Like if you really pay attention to this stuff and think, does this seem like these people are telling me the truth? Do I have any reason to believe these people are telling me the truth right now? The answer is always no. So you just accept it as information among other information. Try to learn whatever moral lessons you can with, extract your meaning from these things, examine these things as stories because that's what they are, and then try to move on. And if all of the influencers and all of the media outlets all the information you are consuming is making you feel bad about all of it, step away, focus on your own life. Make sure that you are taken care of, your family and friends are taken care of, focus on your community, and stop watching the television. It's okay for everybody to take a break. There is no reason to be dooming or to be afraid or to be blackpilling, okay? If you need to take a break, take a break. Other people will keep things going just fine. Find something else to focus on or teach yourself something. a habit, a new practice, find a new hobby, figure out something that is going to help you be better prepared for the future you want to live in, and go pursue that. Get offline. All right. So I guess let me find some more questions. I hope that was helpful. I mean, cheers to your son for being a conscious person at age 19. I was in college, like becoming a president of a fraternity, and I mean, I did fine in school, but I spent most of it drinking and listening to music with my friends and playing lots of N64. I mean, they had GoldenEye out at that point. If you've ever played James Bond on a Nintendo 64 with three of your friends in the same room, that is like one of the greatest things ever. That was so much fun in college. I can't even believe it. Okay, let's keep going. Is there a way to open this in the Rumble app? Yeah, probably. Guys, if you have any problems with these streams, I don't know what to do beyond give you the link. If you copy that link and paste it into the search bar on Rumble, I imagine it will take you to the right place. I know that it's not always the best to watch it through the browser if you are on mobile. But if you're watching through your browser on mobile, you can just make it go full screen, and then you can make that part of the screen detach. And once it does, you can just swipe it off the screen, and then it'll just play in the background. I mean, that's how it works for me. So that's the best answer I can give you. I know some people on Substack were having some issues. I don't know how to help you beyond that. Yeah, Trump is going into Waukesha today. Someone noted that is where the Christmas parade was a couple years ago. I guess that was, I think, the end of 2022 when some BLM enthusiast drove a car through the Christmas parade, a very sad event. I don't know what it would be like to look back on that now. Re-examining stuff from before is always really interesting. I think that maybe that's going to be something that I start doing. Maybe I'll start doing it next week and prepare some stuff, just going through some of the news from 2020, some of the articles that we were being fed on a regular basis. We can look back 4 years now and see what they told us, kind of taking all that in again with kind of more mature, more well-informed eyes and ears. And I think it'll be really shocking and maybe a bit revelatory what we were convinced to believe, even amongst our severe doubts. I doubt that there's anybody in this chat right now. Maybe there is, and obviously welcome to you if you have figured it out since then. But I think most people in here were probably extremely skeptical of the COVID narrative from the very beginning. I was, within the first 2 weeks, I was like, okay, this is all bullshit, and these people are clearly trying to kill us. Otherwise, they would be doing things that might work instead of all of these things that obviously don't work and couldn't be dumber and more automatically destructive of society. I mean, the dumbest thing you can ever possibly do if you're trying to protect and preserve a society is to stop the economy. The entire purpose of going to war, ideally, this is kind of mythically, this is how we were taught to view it, at least. The purpose is and should be to preserve your society when another society is compromising the preservation of your society. That is why you go to war. And so if you are taking a warlike posture to a threat that great, and your response is to do things that would be the outcome of losing a war, then you are clearly not trying to win the war. And that was all I needed to see and know at that point. Okay, so I am trying to scan through these old comments. I'm going to have to skip through most of the Trump speech-related comments. I'm going to try to catch up, because otherwise I cannot even be in any sort of of contemporary communication with you guys. Can you please weigh in on the Trump RFK Jr. vax fight? Says Kendra. I can. I talked a little bit about this on the podcast on Monday. I talked at least about RFK Jr. and Trump's statement about him the other day, where he said that RFK Jr.'s views on the vax are fake. I think one of the major problems I have with RFK Jr. as it relates to the vax and as it relates to whether or not his candidacy is real or not, and whether or not it is pro-Trump or anti-Trump. There are a lot of people involved in the RFK Jr. info op, and we have seen these people over the course of the last 4 years. And I don't want to cast aspersions on any of them, because while I am not 100% certain that they are ultimately doing something good and good for the interests of America first, I definitely also am not convinced they're not doing that. So I don't want to cast aspersions on any of them. I am saying I have a particular perspective. If I am sharing my perspective, then I'm going to be honest about what I am sharing. I'm not trying to make these people my allies. If it turns out that they are good and they think that I owe them an apology, I will be happy to extend them an apology. If they don't want to forgive me for doubting them, that is every bit their right. And that is not the possibility of that happening is not going to stop me from imparting my opinion. So I am totally open to being convinced that RFK Jr. is everything from a plant meant to convince people that Trump could not win the 2024 election, to the extent that we will have an election. Anything from that purely oppositional viewpoint all the way to RFK Jr. being Trump's vice president. So I'm open to all of the possibilities in there. And I think it's just my job to try to figure out what that scenario looks like. As new information comes out, I will treat it as information among other information, see how it maps onto my understanding of reality, and let that new information inform my understanding of reality as I move forward. I think it is good that RFK Jr. is speaking out against the COVID vaccine, speaking out against the medical establishment, the NIH, the NIAID, the CDC, and their role, pharma's role in lobbying the federal government, in buying off politicians, in influencing the federal government. I am concerned about the relationship between the CDC and the Department of Defense. I think RFK Jr. is good at all those things. I also think he is good at potentially pursuing the deep state and the intelligence apparatus. That said, I don't know that any of that is purely authentic and that it would be anything more than a controlled opposition operation. I do not trust him. I have no reason to trust him. I also have no reason to support him. So there is no reason that I need to make a determination on what I think of his character on May 1st of 2024. It provides me no advantage whatsoever to determine that that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is a good guy or a bad guy. Makes no difference in my life. Makes no difference in my understanding. If anything, it will make me more rigid in supporting one of those positions as new information comes in, and it will open me to the possibility of increasing the likelihood of getting something wrong. So therefore, I form no ultimate opinion of him. In terms of the vax, Donald Trump is clear on the vax. He just said it again today in his speech. He will provide no federal funding for any school pushing race theory or gender theory or mandating masks or vaccines at any point. That is the end of the entire vaccine regime, all the way down to kindergarten in public schools, or even maybe pre-K in any public setting. Because all of those organizations, most particularly these colleges, rely on federal funding. Okay? Colleges, by the way, are a very important part of the election fraud scam. Okay? So the colleges, and they have enormous endowments, all of which need to eventually be subject to drainage. So we're going to see all sorts of things happen with the colleges. But the removal of federal funding ends the vaccine regime permanently. And all of the reaction to this COVID vaccine ends the vaccine regime permanently. Now, I believe that Donald Trump and Robert F. Kennedy Jr. have been in coordination on all of this since they were considering forming the vaccine commission or committee, whatever it was called. I think it was in the, I think it was 2017, 2018. And the story is that Bill Gates came in and had given $1 million, or maybe it was Pfizer or Moderna or one of them, had given $1 million to Trump's inaugural committee. And so for $1 million, the multi-billionaire sold out the entire American people and made them subject to genocide. Now, people like that influencer moron, and Zero Mali on Twitter, he's been pushing that for 3 years. It has always been a retarded position. And he is one of those RFK Jr. guys. He was a Bernie bro before that. He's very, very edgy. I get it. That stuff is for retards. All the Ron DeSantis supporters believe that as well. And they will eventually move to the RFK Jr. thing. That's why Trump was calling it out over the weekend. So those are my thoughts on that. I don't think there is a fight there. Whatever fight there is performative, I guess. Regardless, it doesn't matter. Anybody who took that vaccine and is going to then blame Donald Trump for pushing an optional vaccine to market while already having brought out a range of therapeutics that should make it impossible to distribute that vaccine under an emergency use authorization. And then that was done. Trump had a history of talking about how bad vaccines were. Trump told us from the very beginning that the COVID narrative was a hoax. He told us that it was going to go away with or without a vaccine. He gave us any number of reasons, as many reasons as we could ever possibly need to not take that vaccine. All he did was get it to market on a faster timeline, according to the narrative, maybe not even in reality. And that was able to convince people that lockdowns were no longer necessary, because the elites and wannabe elites in our society would have loved to have been locked down forever. Trump's actions will also ultimately be the cause of the end of the vaccine regime in our country, so that little babies and little children no longer get subject to getting pricked 80 times with these toxic pharmaceutical products. So anybody who thinks that Trump is a villain in a vaccine scenario has some screws loose. And that is the way to approach this argument, okay? You don't say, yeah, I know, you're right, commie. You got me on that one. Trump probably is a bad guy on the vaccine. I'll give you that one. Now, can we unite on that so that you'll stop saying terrible things about me and calling me stupid for 4 years straight and saying that I'm a racist and determined to destroy our democracy? And oh yeah, Biden didn't get 81 million real lawful American votes. How about you address that, commie, before blaming Trump for the vaccine in hopes that he won't be reelected, and hope all of that in hopes that that you will never be held accountable for lying about Joe Biden's legitimacy. Okay, so let's keep going. I'll finish this Rumble chat bit. Which show did I go over? Trump taking over the Fed. Well, that is Joe Lang's assessment. You can find that article and read that in full at badlands.substack.com and search for Master and Commander. That is the name of the Joe Lang article, where he discusses that exact question at length. And Joe will explain it better than I will. So there's no point in having me summarize. I should say, by the way, because your question was, when was that? I believe that was Friday. RFK Jr. is waking up Democrats. Yes, I agree that he is doing that. I have said from before he began running that would be his role, and that he would be the Donald Trump of the uniparty left. We are in desperate need of one of those, and I am very happy that Donald Trump, or that RFK Jr. is performing that role for us. Let's see what else. Okay. So if you guys don't know, Steve Claybaugh is an old school constitutionalist, and we have a great back and forth going on the Constitution and what that document really does mean and what it was designed to do. And so he just said, I sound like a founding father, and they knew the president would be treated like a king in the future. Presidents are not kings. And it is important to understand that. And I wish that the members of the uniparty left and the uniparty right, working together within the controlled opposition dynamic. This includes, obviously, all of the Ron supporters and all of the people who attest to Joe Biden's legitimacy, despite having little R's next to their name. They are the strongest Biden supporters in the country. They act like presidents are, in fact, kings. And that is a huge problem. It is not Donald Trump's job to make it impossible for your state government to do bad things to you. That is your job. People have to figure out how to not comply. Just say no. Just say no all the time. Stop allowing your principles to be violated. Stop violating your principles for like little treats. It's crazy. And I know that you guys are like the best possible at this, but whoever might hear this in the future needs to understand what this is all about. I mean, just act with some moral courage and conviction in every phase of your life. And if you do it a little bit, you'll start doing it more. And if you do it more, then you'll do it a lot. If you do it a lot, you'll eventually do it all the time. And then you will be an entirely different person with an entirely different outlook on your life. And you will be much better prepared to deal with whatever comes your direction. At least that's how it was for me. And I mean, I'm not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but it certainly makes things a hell of a lot better. Yes, somebody just noted that people have TDS still about Trump and the vaccine. And, you know, maybe that's true. I think what their real problem is that these people are still diehard committed members of the party of false decorum. And they think that they have been mostly right about most things over the last 4 years. And therefore, they cannot admit the other things they are wrong about, right? These are almost always people who will not admit that there is no proof anywhere Joe Biden received 81 million real lawful American votes. If someone attests to the legitimacy of Joe Biden, there is a like nearly 100% chance that they are desperate to make sure Donald Trump does not become president again. And this is the greatest attack point against Donald Trump, or so they think. They think that his weakness is the vaccine. This is not a weakness. It is just what they are using so that they never have to get to the point where they admit, oh, yeah, I lied to the American people from my position of power with a public voice. I lied to people for 3.5 years about the usurpation of the United States of America. So their entire branding as a conservative and as a patriot and as whatever else just completely drops away. And that is the price they pay for executing a political operation within the party of false decorum's incentive structure. They want to become more popular so they can make more money and have more influence. If they cared about the truth, they would have just spoken the truth. They would have risked their platforms. There's no excuses that should be made for these people who have maintained their platforms and this massive flow of income throughout the last 3.5 years while lying to their audiences. And I don't know how people are still in support of that. You know, if it turns out that they're all an info op, hey, I guess I'm willing to apologize to those people too, but I really don't see how that's coming. And at the end of the day, they have to figure out how to explain to their audiences and beyond the reason why they spent 3.5 years lying. And unless Trump is going to pull them into the White House and put a medal on them and say, this person was part of one of the most difficult information operations of all time. We are very sorry that we had to execute this information operation and deceive on some level the American people. But the only way to get us out of the situation we were in is to approach it this way. We explored other manners and they didn't work. This is all we had. You know, if we get to that point, then people are going to have to judge for themselves whether or not they accept that explanation. And hopefully any of those explanations will be on the way to something far more decentralized and a total stripping down of the federal government that enabled the infiltration to take place in the first instance, so that something so dramatic, so jarring, and so controversial would ever have to be attempted in the first place. We will eventually be talking about those things, so it makes sense for us as the people who are looking further forward based on a more forward set of information in terms of an informational timeline. It's going to behoove us to be thinking about these issues well in advance of them actually arriving. Because the thing is, any of this stuff we miss in the future will be used as an attack point. And to the extent that's effective, they will be able to push back against the progress we made. That is the only opportunity they will have to push back against the progress, unless there is some kinetic event so substantial that it gets everybody back on the same page at once. And I sincerely do not believe that they have one of those in them, because I don't think that an alien psyop would work, and I don't think that a supposed nuclear war psyop would work either, even if they were to stage a kinetic false flag attack on U.S. soil. Okay. Any thoughts on Pope Francis? From Afton Bodji. That seems like a very, very strong Italian last name you got right there. I don't really have any thoughts on Pope Francis. I do appreciate the work and the letters of Archbishop Vigano. I like reading his perspective on all of that. I am not a Catholic. I was not raised Catholic. I am not someone who spends a lot of time following issues of the Catholic Church, though I understand they are substantially long in length. I am not the right person to answer that question with any degree of authority. It seems to me like he is an overt globalist. But as always, I am going on my impressions from what I know without having studied that issue with any great deal of depth. So it's entirely possible that I am subject to the projected inversion within the false reality and have assumed some of that inversion myself. So I'm just not the person to speak on that. I hope to know more in the future. You know, I try to analyze things as quickly as I possibly can. I think we will probably get to that stage in the future. And at that point, I will attempt to learn quite a bit about it on a very quick timeline. Once you have an idea, once you have a pretty good framework of what's happening now, it's considerably easier to look forward and to look backwards and to look all around at other countries and other issues around the world and understand them in the same sort of, I don't know, conceptual matrix and these little nodes, how they intersect and touch one another. I spent the weekend doing that on a lot of the history of Israel and read some pretty serious academic research on the history of the global proxy state in Israel, the Balfour Declaration, how all of that came to be. There is a very interesting history there, and no one will be surprised to learn that we were lied to about all of it, and that we continue to be lied to about all of it, strangely by the same people trying to blame Donald Trump for the vaccine and the same people who were supporting Ron DeSantis as either the legitimate best hope of the Republican establishment or a kayfabe op designed to bait the Republican establishment. All of those people promote the same neocon, globalist, Zionist agenda that is encouraging wars in the Middle East right now and continues to encourage the same proxy wars in Ukraine for the same purpose. So as far as I'm concerned, that is all the same thing. Watching them attempt to beat down these narratives and the obvious history as written by them is just another layer of the onion being peeled away, and you can just continue to see the darkness and shadow of its rotten core. And when you read the assessment in the words of Jewish scholars on the left who are globalists and are Zionists, and you see that the claims they are making are the very ones they are then attempting to refute by casting some level of doubt and then calling anti-Semitism, you really have to wonder what you're dealing with. And, I have a bunch of Jewish friends. A bunch of my college friends were Jewish. A bunch of my friends in Los Angeles were Jewish. I don't have any problem with the Jewish people or with Jewish people or with Judaism. It's people and what they do with their beliefs. The Zionist thing is something else. And we have to be able to separate those things. And, as far as Christians go, there's Christians preaching the prosperity gospel. There's Christians who are pastors who are just Christian Zionists. There are a lot of people trying to rip off their congregations and mislead their congregations. You look at a lot of kind of the blooming mega churches in our society, and they might as well be some of these kind of NGOs and activist groups that you see on the left. They are taking advantage of Instagram strategies and doing like these major live streams and trying to grow their impact as if they're going to be the ones tasked to save the world. And it all comes off as blatantly commercial and exploitative as far as I'm concerned. The entire purpose is that the enemy we are actually facing, the evil it is we are facing, inverts everything. Of course, they're going to invert religions. And then they will figure out how to run the thing and its inversion in parallel and try to conflate them so that anytime you are going to criticize the inverted version, they say, oh, you're criticizing the good version too. And they align with the good version. And then anytime you want to be, you want to align yourself with the good version and say, we are both people of goodwill and good faith. Let's find where we have common cause. Well, then you are told, well, you have to be accused of supporting the inversion and the bad version too. And if we continue to approach things that way, there's no way that we are ever going to find solutions for these things. And you can't be America first without practicing Americanism. And that means that the most important things are to be about America and to be ascribing to America's founding values. And we can do that as Christians and as patriots without succumbing to the conflation that is set before us. I'm not going to let someone who wore a mask, or someone who is obsessed with garnering attention for themselves, or someone who is obsessed with materialistic consumerism or scientific materialism. I'm not going to let any of those people judge me or my faith or my knowledge or my beliefs or my actions. I don't care. Those people are not my judges. So these issues get really, really complicated. And that complication is intentional because the enemy that we deal with has inverted things, and they have assumed the identities of people they are not. They pretended just a few years ago to be fighting for Black people, the same Black people that they have sold as slaves for centuries and poisoned with their pharma programs, whose neighborhoods they have destroyed in urban centers around the country, whose votes they steal. So are we supposed to believe that part of the inversion? And then should we blame that on Black Americans, or should we blame it on the people who are clearly deceiving us and selling us the inversion? And so, man, that's I think as far as We need to go on that today. I posted in the Telegram info stream. And if you guys aren't in that info stream, like if you want to know what I am talking about and where I am getting the information that I am analyzing, and you want to hear extended versions and understand my analysis as I go throughout the day and these issues build, that's the best place to follow me. Truth Social's fine, but Telegram is where it's really at. Telegram is the best technology, and it is the fastest app. It is the easiest way to share information in the most consumable manner. I think it's the best platform. That is why I share there. T.me/very reasonable, and you will find all of that. The last point, though, is, in kind of as an extension of everything I just said, people are waking up right now, right? And Christians accepted me despite the fact that I had been voting for Democrats. I had been an atheist. I had been an outspoken atheist, and I had said bad things about them. And people forgave me and accepted me. And I want to be the same sort of forgiving. When people seek forgiveness and they try to do the right thing, we have to welcome them. I mean, all of 2021, I talked extensively about what I call redeemable communists. We still have to be in that place. And the problem is that conflation works the strongest on people in that identity group, on the good side of that identity group. Like, Christians don't want to target their energy and their focus about Christians who happen to have succumbed to the prosperity gospel, or ones that end up Christian Zionists, because then you believe that the war is within your side. But that's the same thing that people were concerned about when I went after all these Ron supporters. I mean, if you want the hate movement targeted at you with no response whatsoever, you can continue to go on and think that these people are going to be your allies, but they're not. And we need to stop compromising with people just because they tell us they're our allies. Rhinos in name, or Republicans in name only. I mean, we can move aside from the Republican thing, but the uniparty right, not our allies. If they want to have a political coalition with conservatives and with Christians, they know where to find us. That is my standpoint on all of this stuff. Okay, so, but you can totally disavow the bad elements of your own identity groups. We shouldn't be talking about identity groups in the first place, because that's collectivist shit. Who needs that? Okay, so let's go to a little bit of the Substack stuff, because I think that there are some questions that people made in the comments of the Substack. And maybe that's the best place, guys, in the future to leave the comments, because I'll at least certainly remember to always take a look at that. So we have people who weren't able to deal with the link. I think we've covered that. Okay. My bitters and soda is looking very, it's meeting its end. Okay, so Jonathan Drake asks, have you read much Murray Rothbard? I have not. I've seen a great many Murray Rothbard quotes around over the years, but I have not read any Murray Rothbard. I would absolutely love to do that. I have a reading list that is always far too long, and I continue to give myself more and more homework all the time. I think I've talked about this on the podcast before. I'm not sure where else I have talked about it, but I try to take a generalist approach on all of this. And part of the reason that I do that is because no one does. The only person who gets anywhere kind of close to that in the mainstream is Joe Rogan. Now, I'm not saying that Joe Rogan is a good guy. You know, maybe he's executing an information operation Otherwise, he's a guy that's ignored some of the most important issues in the country for the last 3.5 or 4 years and continues to have known intelligence assets onto his show to lie to his 11 million supporters. That aside, Joe Rogan has a conversational understanding of an incredible number of topics, which requires a very certain kind of intelligence. And he certainly does have that. I don't think that there are enough people out there who are able to connect disparate issues along kind of connective tissues that are not widely recognized in the mainstream understanding. And so I think that there is a major need for that. And even among that, I think that there is a specific need for people who understand all of the critical stories from a variety of perspectives so that the way the narratives are kind of interlinked and interplaying is able to be fleshed out. Because without that, without a generalized understanding of all of the narratives within an issue and then all of the issues that might intersect that, well, then you can't really talk about a big picture perspective of anything. And what we end up with from not only the mainstream cable media, the mainstream print media, and the mainstream podcast outlets, and you'll all know that I include the Daily Wire and the Blaze and Tucker Carlson and Fox News and all of these normie conservative outlets, in that they all have specific experts on to tell them everything about one issue. And they give you one perspective on that issue that fits right into their presentation of the central narrative surrounding that issue. And then they exclude all the other perspectives. Now, they might be giving you the best perspective. I'm not saying that they're not doing that. They're just not allowing you to understand the issue in any way that will help you to connect it to the bigger picture. And so we have an unfortunate deficit in our media as far as that's concerned. Continuing with Jonathan's question, though, I enjoyed the discussion on the simulation theories last week. As a Christian persuaded by the more reformed tradition, Calvin et al., the concept of a divine simulation isn't anathema to me. The rub for some aspects of the conversation seems to be free will versus sovereign will. And personally, I think it's a both and rather than an either or situation. A book I think you'd find interesting in this context is Lorraine Botner's The Reformed Doctrine of Predestination. Forewarning, it's dense but very compelling. I think it was written in the 1930s and in Reformed circles has been considered the go-to for this topic. Also forewarning, Lorraine is a dude. Gotta love naming practices of previous generations. Cool. I am more than happy to get into that at some point, probably right around the time that I get into Murray Rothbard, which I can only say will be later. Those seem like very interesting issues to me. I am obviously very interested in the simulation theory, how that intersects with a Christian understanding of how things work would, I believe, be extremely interesting, add a new level of understanding that connects to a different perspective. And I'm always thankful when I am able to do that. Windy C. At GART 4, I think it was G Money who brought up the idea of the solidarity movement in Poland as an option for those who have had enough of what their government is doing. What do you think about the idea of a nationwide strike shutting everything down if they announce Joe Biden as the winner of the 2024 election with his 120 million plus votes? Not riots, but a prolonged strike all over the country. I won't be able to attend much of the live stream. Okay. So what do I think of a nationwide general strike? That is hard to say. That is not something I have ever put any thought into. I guess the question is, how long does that last? I think that could be a very effective show of force. And by force, I mean, obviously, a show of size and strength in numbers You made it clear, obviously, in your note that this does not include riots, that it would also not include violence in the streets and nothing like that. I don't think we need anything like that. We had an extensive conversation on the potential for civil war in the United States at GART a couple of weeks ago. I believe John might be intending to make all of that free to the public in a number of weeks. I'm encouraging him to do that. So I hope that's what happens. Otherwise, I guess I could probably clip and publish some clips of that conversation. So I don't know how deep to go into that. I don't think we need that. I think that the country, by and large, is waking up slowly but surely. Once people get to a certain point, they cannot be held back. They cannot be kept inside Ben Shapiro's diner, not even by Tucker Carlson's infectious laugh. So at some point, once people have reached that area, if things continue to go badly and the people who are trying to keep them penned in continue to be wrong about some of the most important issues and continue to have those people consistently behind on issues that matter to them, then those people will eventually be punished for that by their own audiences. And I thought that process would go faster. I cannot believe that people are satisfied with any of these normie viewpoints. I think a lot of that, to be honest, is a product of people on our side continuing to protect these mainstream media figures as they blatantly lie to everyone. Oh, you have to just let them keep doing it. They're waking up the normies. No, they're not. They're not. I mean, how can you even say that? When are they going to wake up the normies? The same people who are watching them now were watching them 4 years ago. And all they've done is progress to the point that these people have allowed them to progress. That point is not even close enough to real time on an informational timeline. It is no better than where they were 4 years ago. They were years behind at that point. They are still years behind now. The purpose is to advance them as far along an informational timeline as possible, not to wave to them while they are still behind the fence and say, hey, I'll see you when you get to the other side. But yeah, just stay back there with Tucker the whole time. That's going to be great. I'm not even trying to, this is not like some anti-Tucker screed. Again, Tucker might be part of an information op. Maybe he is rolling all of this out on the appropriate timeline. I get that that is a possibility. Okay. I understand that. In the meantime, you pat your normie friend on the back and say, congratulations for figuring out the thing I told you 2 years ago. Now, if you want to know what else is going on with that, maybe let's try to pull you up here. Maybe try to start listening to something else. You know what? Stick with your Tucker Carlson. We're going to get rid of your Dave Rubin podcast. We're going to get rid of your Michael Knowles podcast and your Matt Walsh podcast. Oh, I know he's got a very, very full beard and loves to talk about trannies 24/7, but I hope you can let that go. You don't need an hour of that every day. You know, until we're able to do that, like, what's the point? They're going to always need to wake up the normies. And if you still have normies in your life because they are in your family or your intimate friend circle, if they are on the way to waking up and they have made consistent progress, then you can congratulate them for the progress they've made and also try to keep pulling them along. You're not doing it for you, okay? You're doing it for them. Because when we are not able to be successful at these things, then we watch the people we love hurt themselves, all right? And I understand what this is like because not everybody in my family or even the friend group I still have, and obviously that excludes the 90% of my friends that I lost in 2020. Not all of them are caught up and no one is where I am. So you see these things, you know that they are going to confront these things in the future. It is necessarily true that if the vaccines were poisonous, and we certainly believe them to be, then these people will eventually have to confront that reality, whether it is through their own sickness or a realization through paying attention to studies, or some realization in the future where the pharma companies are held liable in court and it becomes obvious to absolutely everybody that they have poisoned people. At some point, they're going to have to face that reality. They are better off facing it as soon as they possibly can, because that is what is going to allow them to make the best possible decisions for them and their lives. Same is true of election fraud. Same is true of all these other issues. Okay. The people they are supporting are allowing all of this evil to continue. The support they created for Joe Biden, forget about the votes cast, because the votes are obviously meaningless. The reported results were obviously fake. But whatever support they gave to the narrative about Joe Biden's plausibility as a winner and legitimacy as president, that has been extraordinarily destructive for the world. And people will blame them for it, which means that eventually this will be extraordinarily destructive for them, despite all the other decisions they're making, or in addition to all the other bad decisions they're making in their lives. And so for us to congratulate them for just making their way to Tucker Carlson, well, that's nice. We can be happy for their progress, and we can share with them our happiness about the progress. But the point we have to be able to make is, I care about you deeply. I want you to make good decisions in your life. There is now a consistent and irrefutable pattern of us making the proper decision about a range of issues nonstop for 4 years, while you have made the wrong decisions about all of these issues. Not only were you wrong, and you know you were wrong, but you cannot even explain what the right answer is now or why you accepted the wrong answer. And you continue to listen to all the people who led you to those wrong answers. So what are we possibly supposed to do for these people if we're not able to have that conversation with them out of a place of caring and saying, I am now worried about you. You are holding on to this activity, which is, by the way, not some belief system that is very, very meaningful in their lives. It is an addiction to the central narrative. They cannot find any comfort in this world realizing and accepting that those stories they have told are false. That is a very, very sad state of being, but it is one that is directly connected to the fact that they do not have true faith in their lives. Because if they did, admitting they were wrong about a bunch of things that they will admit they don't know anything about should be very easy. Okay, let me get back to that conversation. Oh, no, I answered that question. I'm going to try to catch up here a little bit on the chat. I'm doing my best to pick out things that look like questions here, guys. I'm trying to find rants if there are any. Well, if no one has questions, then I will I'll maybe pull up a couple of articles that I found interesting today. Oh, wait, here's one. If the 2020 election fraud is made accepted by the public, doesn't it invalidate all elections, including current government? That is from Trail Rida. Yeah, I think that is irrefutably true. I think that this is something that I've talked about extensively on the podcast over the years. I believe that our government is illegitimate at every conceivable level right now. I think that everybody should be challenging the legitimacy of their government wherever they can at all times. And when that challenge becomes clear, if that government does not dissolve and step down, then they're committing treason. I mean, that is just how this works. Okay. You cannot seize power illegitimately and then tell everyone that they have to follow your rules and then try to imprison those people. That is a dictatorship. That is not a constitutional republic. It is not any form of quote unquote democracy, except the global democracy and the global communism that is the base of the one world government's ideology. Yes, it should invalidate the entirety of the current government and the governments that have come before it. I posted once on Truth Social and Telegram a few months ago that I believe that every politician going back in time who cannot provide immediate and direct proof that they are legitimately elected and legitimately serving should be immediately considered illegitimate. And if we are unable to prove any of our elections were illegitimate going back through the past, then every bit of legislation should be unwound until we find legislation that is legitimate. And if that takes us all the way back to the original Constitution and Bill of Rights, then we should go that far. And if it takes us further back than that, I'm open to that too. I think that that is the probable right place to go back to, but I would also be open to arguments that the Constitution was initially invalid by lack of support and the will and consent of the people for whom that Constitution was set out to govern. I am entirely open to the possibility that the Constitution itself was a centralizing work by that same global regime who wanted to give us the illusion of independence from the British Empire, but never actually gave it. We can see that same pattern and phenomenon playing out throughout the world right now in all of the British Commonwealth nations, where British royals, but truthfully, the British Crown, which is not British royals, it is the bankers in the City of London. They are able to approve the appointment of prime minister in British Commonwealth nations. And if a monarchy, a probably defunct monarchy, is able to choose who your prime minister is, you are not a free and independent people. You are a subject who has fallen for a mythology about the country you live in. And if we see an organization like the European Union, we should compare that to the United States of America. If we see the forming of a potential African Union, we should see that as a future version of what the European Union was, and the European Union as a future version of what the United States was. It's taking a collection of separate neighbors and trying to make them one centralized thing that has to live under the same rule structure as all the rest of those neighbors, thereby creating the centralizing force that is able to extract power and resources from all of those formerly decentralized elements, and that will eventually always make its way down to sovereign people. Steve Claybaugh in the chat writes, "What is a union?" I think Steve is going to provide a better definition of that than I will. So, I'll just say it's the collection, or it was ideally meant to be the collection of these separate entities that would work together to accomplish a very limited set of purposes. And now it is to the point, after the Constitution was overthrown through the Civil War Reconstruction, now it is to the point where the government is allowed to do whatever it wants, and totally unaccountably, not only because we do not have legitimate elections, but because the illegitimate constitutional amendments that were passed during the Reconstruction have given the Congress and then the agencies the power to create laws and regulations without even court oversight or any blowback whatsoever. There is no accountability at this point. Hopefully, with Chevron after West Virginia versus EPA a couple cycles ago, hopefully with those two decisions going in our direction, which I believe they will, we will have then the judicial and judiciary support and basis for scaling back and clawing back all of that stuff. It is totally illegitimate right now. None of the rules and regulations that they pass will ultimately have any standing. the Chevron decision will go our direction. Then legal challenges will come up on virtually everything these agencies do. All of that stuff will be invalidated. And then when Trump is once again recognized as the duly elected president, he will use the power of the executive branch to eliminate the federal bureaucracy and the deep state and administrative state. So that is how I see that going. I hope that I am correct about that. I think I am. That seems to be what is coming into view. And again, think about informational timelines. Normies are getting some version of that story. They are all being told that Trump will be a dictator in trying to claw back a bit from the federal government. When the Supreme Court makes that decision, they are going to be told that the Supreme Court are Trump-appointed conservatives who are taking over the country, and the Supreme Court is thus invalidated. That is a total inversion within the false reality. There is nothing the Supreme Court that could do aside from ruling publicly and clearly that Joe Biden is illegitimately pretending to be president. I think that stuff has already been taken care of. It just is not public. We will see if I'm right about that or not. But I think there's probably nothing more they could do, nothing more constitutional and constitutionally sound they could do than destroy the administrative state. It was never intended. There is no constitutional justification for it. And I hope that we go all the way back and rescind these amendments. And no, that doesn't mean that slavery is going to be reconstituted when that happens. Anyone who believes that there is not slavery in this country right now is ignorant and clueless. And the funny thing is, people would be like, oh, you sound like a leftist when you're saying that. Well, no, I'm not, because I'm not saying it about one identity group. Yes, there are enslaved Black people. There are also enslaved Hispanic people and white people and Asian people and Native Americans. Anyone who pays taxes to this federal government is enslaved on some level. Anyone whose life is restricted by these illegitimate rules and regulations passed and installed by illegitimate representatives is enslaved by this federal government. The fact that we have to register newborn babies with the state is proof of slavery. So the idea that we have to even listen to a criticism where we are somehow pro-slavery by also being pro-constitution and pro-state rights, that is the stuff of morons. And if we are going to be cowed by being called racist over these issues, then we are not prepared for this fight in the first place. Okay. I think that Steve answered my question somewhere, or posted how he describes. Steve says that, FYI, a republic is the size of a county. Even a state is too big to be a republic. And that is an excellent point. The idea that somehow one of these congressmen can adequately represent 750,000 constituents is preposterous. Not that they care about representing constituents in the first place, because they absolutely most certainly do not. There is no argument to be made that these people care about their constituents. They only care about their constituents to the point where they want to make sure their constituents don't make so much noise and raise such a fuss that people will not believe they could have won their elections legitimately. That is the only extent to which they care about what their constituents think. That is why they don't do public events and town halls when they go back to their districts anymore. That is why a lot of them don't even go back to their districts. Adam Schiff's main residence, he says it's not his main residence, but it is his main residence, is in Maryland. And he is trying to be a senator from California. He has been a representative from California, from Los Angeles, for, I want to say 14 years, but it could be longer than that. And has lived in Maryland for virtually that entire time. So that is an abomination. That is an affront to the Constitution. It is an affront to the idea of representative government, no one should stand for this stuff, and no one should be fooled by it. Okay, so I'm not sure that Steve did give me a response there, but he said I'm doing okay, so I guess that works for me. All right, where are we going here, guys? If you don't want to direct me, oh wait, I have to let me share this thing, and maybe we'll talk about this for a minute. So there is this tweet. Now, I have not vetted this because I am giving it to you for purposes of humor only, okay? So I don't care whether or not this is really the account of the 101st Airborne Division. I mean, I will look, and if it is obviously an easy answer, it says that they are. It says the official Twitter page for the 101st Airborne Division Air Assault Screaming Eagles stationed at Fort Campbell. Appearance here does not equal a DOD endorsement. I will assume that this is their official account. If you eventually tell me that it is wrong, then thank you for providing actionable information. But for the purposes of this video, it makes not a single bit of difference, because I am sharing this because it's kind of hilarious. This says, did you know the 101st had a glider regiment in World War II? The 327th Glider Infantry Regiment helped to drop in supplies to the Allied invasion of Europe. Today, the 327th's legacy lives on in 1 BCT as 1st Battalion, 327th Infantry Regiment Bulldogs. Okay, so I guess we are watching All right. So I think that I was sent that based on hang gliding go-karts. I'm suspecting that, or paragliding go-karts. I'm sorry. I'm suspecting that's the case. I'm not sure that's the case. If somebody sent that to me for another reason, then I guess it went over my head. Someone asked if those were used during World War II. I think that is the implication there. What are we supposed to make of World War II at this point? We were lied to about the causes. We were lied to about the politics leading up to it. We were lied to about what happened, and we were lied to about the results. So I take all of establishment World War II history with a grain of salt on some level. There's no reason to believe that any particular element of it is provably real. And we can watch the people who are most upset by that statement lie to us on a regular basis, while lying to us and forcing us into making decisions that are repeatedly bad for us. So why wouldn't we say that we are lied to about all these things? It is clear that we are lied to about all of these things. Now, I'm not saying that I know what the truth is, and I am not saying that grave atrocities were not committed. I am virtually certain that the grave atrocities that were committed as a result of the actions of the same people who are committing atrocities around the world right now. And in fact, they are the ideological and bloodline descendants of the very same people in the very same regime who were committing those atrocities back then. So I don't know who at this point is still succumbing to being talked out of that position. But I'm not going to succumb to being talked out of that position. There's no amount of of browbeating and nonsense and someone telling me, the history, over and over again, that is going to make me change that viewpoint. I can read the history to them from their sources and understand that we were lied to about it. In fact, let me pull up one of those sources that I've been discussing this weekend, and I will provide you a specific example of this. Okay, this is a document that I posted about many times over the course of the past few days since Sunday. This is an article. Actually, you know what? Before we get into the article, let me go to Wikipedia. Now, guys, I understand people are like, Wikipedia is a CIA psyop. Okay, cool. All right. It's information among other information. I don't use it as an authoritative source. I use it as a jumping off point for beginning my research, because Wikipedia will tell me all of the issues that intersect a given issue or a given character, and it'll give me a place to start. It'll tell me, hey, these are issues that have been widely discussed about this particular issue or this particular character. Go to early life, see what somebody's background was, what their history was. A lot of times when you're looking up bad guys, you'll find out that they are Prussians and part of the Prussian system. And then you can go look them up in Prussiagate, and you'll probably have a lot of the work done for you, because that series is one of the best red pills of all time. If you want to know how we got here and where we're going, read Prussiagate, read Devolution, understand the Q stuff, and then just figure out how to analyze mainstream media. And I hope that my podcast helps people get into some productive habits in doing that. But yeah, so let me look up, let me see if I can find this writer on Wikipedia so we have a little bit of this guy. Okay, so yes, we do. All right. So this is the man who wrote what I'm about to show you. His name is Martin Seth Kramer. Here is his Wikipedia page that everyone can now see on the live stream. Martin Seth Kramer, born in Washington, D.C., is an American-Israeli scholar of the Middle East at Tel Aviv University and the Washington Institute for Near East Policy. His focus is on the history and politics of the Middle East, contemporary Islam, and modern Israel. He has an extensive education, master's in history from Columbia, his PhD from Princeton. This guy is a regime-approved expert. Okay? I don't think any way to disagree with my presentation of him as a regime-approved expert to this point, okay? Here's his whole background, a great many books, widely published on a range of subjects here. He was an advocate of attacking Saddam Hussein in the wake of 9/11, so it's not like he is some peacenik commie liberal. He was a senior policy advisor on the Middle East to Rudy Giuliani in his 2007 presidential campaign. So this guy seems like a Zionist, globalist, neocon through and through. Okay? If I am wrong about any of that, I am more than happy to apologize. This has all the makings of a globalist, Zionist neocon. Neoconservatism is ideologically an outgrowth of Trotsky. Okay? So ultimately, neoconservatives are leftists. The fact that they ever associated with the Republican Party at all means they were effective in controlled opposition and very effective in their infiltration of a Republican Party, which is what allowed them to form the American Uniparty, which is the globalist, Zionist, faction in the American government. Okay. All of that is extraordinarily clear at this point. The only people who deny that are members of the Uniparty. Okay. So this guy is as regime, as neocon, as Zionist as you can possibly find. All right. So now let's move on to the actual article I'm referring to. I think I've made that point loud and clear. If anyone wants to dispute this point, by the way, I'm going to look in the chat to see if anybody has any qualms with how I have just presented this. Okay. I think that is no one is arguing with that. Listen, if I'm wrong somehow, again, more than happy to apologize. I don't think I am portraying this guy in any way other than he would portray himself. He would simply argue that all of those things are good and how everyone should be. And he might argue with the labeling. He might understand that neoconservative can be used as a pejorative at this point, and he might attempt to disavow it in some way or another. He might attempt to tell us that, no, he's just a conservative. I voted for this guy and that guy and that guy. Okay, I don't care who you voted for. I care about the ideology you support, and the ideology he supports is clear. And again, it is okay for people to support other ideologies, but let's just get it all on the table, understand what we all support. It is not liberal versus conservative. You can't just call yourself a conservative because of this priority or that priority and have other people repeat it and agree that you are a conservative. It is nonsense. Okay. So this here is a publication called Mosaic, Advancing Jewish Thought. Okay. So again, a Jewish publication written for Jews. I'm assuming by Jews. Again, I have no problem with the Jewish people. Okay. I have no problem with their faith-based beliefs. I have a problem with Zionism, political Zionism. I have a problem with neoconservatism and its ideological roots. And I have a problem with warmongering and agendas that point toward global domination, or I should say world domination. Okay? This article now is hosted at scholar.harvard.edu. So I don't know how much more careful I can be to explain that this isn't from some white supremacist, anti-Semitic, anti-Zionist. I am presenting to you the words of a neoconservative Jewish scholar who happens to support the Zionist cause and the globalist cause. Martin Kramer in Mosaic, Advancing Jewish Thought, June 5th, 2017, The Forgotten Truth About the Balfour Declaration. Throughout this article, his goal on the 100th anniversary of the Balfour Declaration is to make it clear to everybody that the Balfour Declaration that undergirds the global regime's proxy state referred to as Israel in the Middle East, that Balfour Declaration was not just the product of the British Empire and some Zionists imposing their will on a region. This was actually something that was agreed to by all of the Allied powers in World War I, and then it was made part of the preamble of the League of Nations mandate. Okay, so Italy was part of it, the Vatican was part of it, France was eventually part of it, and America was eventually part of it. Two men, Sokolow and Weitzman, or it might be Sokolov. I'm not sure what the pronunciation is on that. Someone in the chat is welcome to correct me if I am wrong about the pronunciation. This writer makes the case that these two men through their understanding of geopolitics and leverage, their negotiation tactics, and how convincing they are, these two men were able to achieve buy-in from the Americans, the French, the Italians, and the Vatican to go along with this effort that was brought to be by powerful Zionists and the British Empire. It started with the Balfour Declaration. They got buy-in for the Balfour Declaration after World War I that America was pulled into by these same forces in order to make sure that the British Empire, who has been controlled by Prussians for centuries, that they would not lose their in World War I. The Allies were brought in, America was brought in to support Britain's victory in World War I that would then facilitate the Balfour Declaration. This is this author's thesis of this article. In good faith, I am representing the argument he made to the best of my ability and understanding. Okay. I've read multiple parts of this multiple times as we go through this document. I'm not going to go through the whole thing because it's 23 pages long. You can see it is quite long. This is a professional academic presentation of all of this. Okay. You can see the section headings: collecting endorsements, the weakness of secret pledges. This is one of the major parts. He wanted to make sure that the secret pledge the British made to King Hussein of Mecca, leader of the Arab revolt, that secret pledge would not stand. And it was easy to deny. It was easy to overturn that secret pledge and to ignore it because it was secret. There was not an understanding in the international community that this would be kept to. Kramer writes, why was this? How was it that the Balfour Declaration became international law while the Hussein McMahon correspondence ended up a dead letter? The answer, there was no Arab Sokolov. Okay, so what are we supposed to make of that? The main negotiators were not involved in that agreement. Therefore, that agreement was null and void as far as they were concerned, because that agreement conflicted with what they needed from the Balfour Declaration. So it was a zero-sum game. It would only be one or the other, and therefore they would choose Balfour. That is how that went in the telling of Martin Kramer, not of Chris Paul on the podcast. That is the telling of Martin Kramer. All right. I'm going to go to my highlighted version of this as we get down toward the end, okay? So I want to try to remember where I was yesterday. So they want to make sure that there is buy-in, public and broad buy-in, that the pledges are not secret. Sokolov has, to a large degree, been written out of this story. This section is mostly about the personal advancement and historical reputation of these men, and how one of them, Weitzman, wanted credit for all of this. I'm saying a lot, and please forgive me if you are on the audio version. This is not going to be obviously as clean as my normal podcasts are. So let's go to this segment a little bit. Britain's retreat from the Declaration. And they're talking here in the 1930s. And we know that in the 1930s, this was the rise of Nazism and the lead up to World War II. Kramer writes, as the sun set on Britain's support for Zionism, Weitzman argued that Britain hadn't the right to discard or even interpret the Balfour Declaration on its own. Why? Not because the text had appeared in the preamble of the League of Nations mandate. By 1939, the League was in tatters. So the thing that provided the legal justification for the proxy state that is now called Israel. The thing that made it legal in international law, according to Kramer, was that it appeared in the preamble to the League of Nations mandate. He admits here that by 1939, the League was in tatters. It was about to fall apart, and it would be reconceived later as the United Nations. But it was invalid at that point. He is admitting it right here. So he's arguing that the British people, 22 years later, had no ability, no authority whatsoever to reconsider what was put into this letter and then in the League of Nations mandate in 1917 and 1918. Instead, he writes, Weitzman cited the World War I commitments made to Zionism by the other allies. Britain had the moral right to rule Palestine only because the civilized nations of the world, in quotes, which constitute the allies as told by Weitzman, as organized by the people who, funded and directed both sides of World War I. So the civilized nations of the world had conferred it for the explicit and direct purpose of helping to build up the Jewish national home. Okay, this is how they refer to it: the Jewish national home, the Jewish national center, the Jewish national state. Because the British had gone in on this and the other allies had agreed to go in on this, now the British could no longer deny or refuse to support this, no matter how things changed in the world or among the people of Britain. None of that mattered. The other countries that joined Britain in the Balfour Declaration had to hold Britain accountable. Now they all needed to enforce the Balfour Declaration together. That is Martin Kramer's argument, not my argument. That is what he is saying in the literal text of his document that he wrote in celebration of the Balfour Declaration's 100th anniversary. It's not me. It's him. I'm showing you exactly what he's saying. And these nations did so because of Zionist exertions. Did not the British government of the time, 1917, 1918, encourage us, the late lamented leader Sokolov, myself, and other friends who were working in the cause of Great Britain and Palestine, go to France, Italy, America, and plead, I do not exaggerate this contribution, that the mandate should be given to Great Britain. We were encouraged to do it. We were encouraged to bring in our people. We were encouraged to pour out all the best in us because we trusted in the word of Britain. That, for us, the rock on which we were to build in Palestine. So that is Weitzman attesting in the late 1930s that Palestine was a state and that they would be building in Palestine with the backing of the British and the other allies. The Americans being brought in by Woodrow Wilson's agreement to go along with the Balfour Declaration at the point at which they were sucked into World War I, supporting World War I efforts, after Woodrow Wilson had already signed the Federal Reserve Act, selling out our country yet another time to the global bankers. This is the state of the world at the time that these words were written. This is the Jewish retelling of this history. It is not my retelling of it. This is from a Zionist, a neoconservative Zionist at that. What am I supposed to do with these words? Let's go on. Thus did Weitzman at his lowest ebb admit the true character of the Balfour Declaration. It had not legitimated Zionism. It was Zionism through its diplomatic efforts among quote-unquote civilized nations, which had legitimated the Balfour Declaration. Not only had its issuance depended on the tacit or explicit agreement of the Allied powers, but that agreement had been secured by the Zionists themselves, by Weitzman, Brandeis, who became a Supreme Court justice. Woodrow Wilson named him one, by the way, a reward for all of this, an order from Woodrow Wilson's paymasters in the global regime? What else should we interpret that to be? And above all, by the lamented but forgotten Sokolov. The centennial of the Balfour Declaration is the perfect opportunity to chip away at the distorted accretions of a century. The largest of these is the notion that the Balfour Declaration arose outside any legitimate framework as the initiative of a self-dealing imperial power. So he is suggesting right now that what he has done is refute the conspiracy theory and misunderstanding that it was the British who seized this land and decided to call it the Jewish nation state that they would then govern as part of the British Empire. It was not that, you see. It was the work of 6 or 7 allies in that cause. So a very small number of people went along with this, and that, in addition to it being part of the preamble of the now defunct League of Nations, that's what gave it its legitimacy in international law. And then the U.S. passed the, where is it in here? I want to get the name right because I can feel myself the Lodge Fish Act. So that is our Congress in 1922 passing a resolution which continues to speak for all of us, apparently, 102 years later. Let's continue. So it was not just the initiative and self-dealing of an imperial power, that being Britain. This is utterly false. The Balfour Declaration wasn't the isolated act of one nation. It was approved in advance by the Allied powers, whose consensus then constituted the only source of international legitimacy. Okay? So it was the Allied powers agreed that this was how it should be. Therefore, this is how it is. Before Balfour, I keep wanting to say Balfour. Before Balfour signed his declaration, leaders and statesmen of other democratic nations signed their names on similar letters and assurances. The Balfour Declaration anticipated a world regulated by a consortium of principal powers, the same world that 30 years later would pass a UN resolution legitimating the establishment of a Jewish state. There it is. It is so because the leaders of various nations and various global governing bodies one day decided it was so. How were they incentivized? How were they leveraged into deciding that would be so? The only presentation here, the only justification, the only leverage here is that they all agreed it was the morally right thing to do based on a history of abuses by various peoples over centuries or millennia. Just a history of abuses means that the leaders, as described in the aftermath of World War I, could simply decide to create that state and then enforce it with the military might of the British Empire and the United States and the forces of Europe. That is it. That is the 100% justification as outlined by scholars, by Jewish scholars. So if I don't tell you that story and I don't show you the proof of that, what are we supposed to do? Just keep going on with this interminably forever? We just have to continue repeating what we've always been told about all of these things? Is that a responsible and honest way to approach these problems? I don't believe that it is. And I don't believe that that requires anything that could in any way be described as anti-Semitic, except by crazed Zionists who understand that to be their only strategy and actually refuting complaints with what they say is the underlying reality. So I don't know how you're supposed to proceed with this if you're not allowed to share writing from their perspective and their viewpoint and critique it in a way that says absolutely nothing bad about people who happen to practice and believe in the Jewish faith. I would feel entirely comfortable making this argument in front of my Jewish friends, and I am sad to say that I am not sure they would be comfortable with me making this argument to them, because they would not like what this implies about the political agenda they've supported. This is not attacking their beliefs and how they want to authentically live their lives. This is not attacking what they believe to be true about God or their place in the universe or any social hierarchy. This is simply a political agenda that has been thrust upon the world for an intended outcome now for well over a century. And I'm not sure what else we can do other than say, let's all get on the same page about what it is we are discussing. And you can tell me your views about what we are discussing. And then I will tell you that my view is that it is our responsibility to look out for the American people and America as a country. It is not our responsibility in any way at all to protect a global regime formed and supported proxy state in Israel. And I'm sorry, that is not any way to protect Jewish people either. So what are we supposed to make of this? I don't know. We can then get into the history of the people claiming to be Jewish and then claiming to make it a necessity that we support the existence of a Jewish state. I guess it's totally okay for people to have that opinion. I'm skeptical of anyone who says that the Bible is what tells them that we must protect through the proliferation of world-destroying weapons and wars, the existence of this obviously contrived proxy state. I don't know. This is not the biblical Israel. They tell you it's not. It's not that they just went and occupied empty space. This was clearly the state of Palestine. They admit it in their own words. So, I don't know. Do we need to trust the experts on this when those same experts told us to wear 3 masks? I'm sorry, I can't do that. I don't know where we are in the chat. The chat in StreamYard didn't, it stopped at some point, although I can see that the comments are still coming through in the chat, and there are even some Rumble rants. So I'm going to try to catch up on those right now. We are now coming up on 3 hours of me sitting here, which is 2 hours post the Trump speech. So I'm probably going to wrap this up in about 10 minutes, give or take any rants that I may embark on. All right. Starborn01 says, "Hey, Chris, what were your opinions on the Jesus is King situation?" I have absolutely no qualms with people saying that. I think that they are talking specifically about the Christ is King info op online. And I say info op because it is part info op. There are certainly people out there who believe that Jesus is Lord and Christ is King and are saying it out of goodwill and good faith and because they want to spread that message. I believe that is a fine message to spread, just as I believe that there are other fine messages to be spread that disagree with that, because people should be able to spread what they believe and the messages on what they believe. To address it as an info op, there are certainly worse ones. Is it designed to make people look like they are exclusive to one belief set? Yeah, I guess it is, to the extent that people are offended by that. I truthfully do not care at all. I am very rarely of the mind that I care about what people are offended about. They don't care what I'm offended about. Okay. They don't care what I'm offended about as a Trump supporter, or as a Christian, or as a truth seeker, or as a person who tries to think for myself. They don't care if I'm offended when they insult something I like. why in the world would I care at all what strangers are offended by? I don't know why anyone even thinks in those terms. If you say I'm offended, my response is, I don't care. Okay? If my friends or my wife say that they're offended, then I care. And I will have a conversation about why they are offended. And then I will determine whether or not I have a role in their offense that I should take responsibility for and that I should apologize for. And if I determine that I don't, I'm not going to apologize. I will say, I care about you. I feel bad that I offended you. I hope maybe we can see eye to eye on this in the future. But I am going to, stand my ground on what I said, because my intent wasn't to be offensive. And while I would like for us to agree about everything, and while I don't want to offend you, there are some places where we might just have to understand that we don't see eye to eye, and maybe in the future we will better align on these things. So I don't care if and when someone is offended. As for Christ is King as an info op, to the extent that it is being peddled by the same people who are obsessed with white replacement theory, then I don't care a whole lot about it. I don't think that we need to align ourselves with these info ops to the extent that they are info ops, and then begin to adopt other beliefs that are shared by people pushing those info ops. That is what those info ops are for. Okay. I am not denying that there is a white replacement theory, and that replacement theory generally for Americans that is being enacted in the world right now. That is a clear part of their agenda. We don't need to deny that. We don't need to dispute that in any way. To understand that we also don't want to align ourselves with the people pushing those info ops. I can't say it more plainly than that. All of these things are info ops. Understand the info op, agree or disagree with the underlying notions and arguments that support that info op, and then just abstain from your participation in the info op. It is very, very simple to learn the lessons, figure out what it is we personally are willing to support, and then understand that, you know what, these people don't actually need our support on the internet so that they can make their position beat down the uniparty communists. I mean, how easy is it to conquer wokeness? This is not the focus any longer. Why don't we just go ahead and push the Christian values we support in the ways we support them, and say Christ is King if you want, and don't say it if you don't want, and participate in the info op if you want, and don't participate if you don't want. Make your own decisions. I'm not here to tell you what to believe. And, when we're making our own decisions, we are far less susceptible to falling for these info ops and getting them to corral us, because Con Inc. is trying to corral you at all times. If you have some view that the mainstream believes is extreme, they're going to set up an info op specifically to attract you and then get you to go along with the other beliefs that align with that info op. You're being opped the whole time. The only solution is to think for yourself. Analyze information on your own. Think for yourself. And by the way, that comes to biblical interpretations as well. All right? If we know that the Bible has been edited in various ways, and I was posting last night quite a bit about the Schofield Bible and the Schofield notes that you can draw a clear line to Christian Zionism from there. You can find the same associations for the Zionists with the Zionists who were pushing the Balfour Declaration. Now, if you want to argue in favor of all that stuff, that's just fine. Okay. I'm not going to agree with you because I can see the inversions. I can see the distortions. I can see the machinations. And if you don't tell me what the leverage was and you just say that everybody was just acting out of the goodness of their heart by committing entire nations to your cause and then waging war in favor of that cause without actually having the people ever weigh in on any of it and the people's understanding already pre-distorted as a prerequisite for all of that, then sorry, you lost me. Okay. We should be able to read the words of the Bible and attempt to understand them in goodwill and good faith. And you can turn to others and ask them, what did they think of that? Or you can turn to sources like the Schofield Bible, if you would like, to try to gain a better understanding of what it is you are reading. We know that church leaders around the country went to seminary, many as a precondition of starting their church in the first place. If those seminaries are anything like the universities through which we learn the rest of the professions in the professional, college educated class, all of these things that one might pursue, we should be able to understand that those institutions are every bit as susceptible to infiltration and distortion as any other institution, and for the exact same reasons, whether they are incentives and punishments within the party of false decorum, or if it's simple money, or if it's compromise, or if it's corruption or anything else. All of these organizations are susceptible to that. Look at the Catholic Church and the history of abuses in the Catholic Church, not to mention the wars. Now, it doesn't mean that every Catholic belief is bad. It doesn't mean that the Catholic ceremonies and rituals are not beautiful when performed. You could say the same thing for Islam or Judaism or whatever else, but those are aesthetic concerns. So, it's all open to infiltration and abuse and distortion, and you can see the results in the American Christian Church, in certain evangelical churches, obviously with the prosperity gospel. Prosperity gospel is a total inversion within the false reality of the emphasis in Christianity and by Jesus of the separation from material concerns. So if you have a Christian church telling you that Jesus wants you to acquire vast wealth and all sorts of material consumer goods, you should look at anyone pitching that ideology as an obvious grifter and liar. I mean, that's my perspective. If you want to have a different one, all good. That's where I'm coming from. To the best of my understanding, maybe in the future, I will adopt a different understanding based on different information. What else can we do? Helga Granowski, thank you for becoming a monthly supporter. I think you are already a supporter on the Substack. You can just support there. Or, hey guys, send Bitcoin. Send sats on some Lightning-oriented app like Strike. Don't know how to do it? Learn to do it. It'll help you. It will better prepare you for the future. I am into Bitcoin, by the way, because I see that as a technology that will allow us to decentralize in a number of ways, because we would like, I'm not sure this is possible, but I believe it is possible, that we can eliminate the infiltration and the influence of the global regime in our societies while preserving society and being able to hopefully move, if not seamlessly forward, something close to that. And in order to do that, we have to have technologies that will allow us to sidestep to a parallel in the technological sphere. And the only way to do that is to move to a new generation of technology that does not rely on the legacy apparatus Bitcoin is part of what allows us to do that. I have encouraged people many times to read software or at least watch some YouTube videos with Jason Lowry so that you can get an understanding of what all of that is about. Listen to our GART talk, specifically my interactions and the interactions of G Money and Patriots in Progress, the interactions of Burning Bright at GART 3 with retired General Quast. There is a technological future that is being introduced and built up out there that is not being talked about at all in the mainstream media. The normie sphere has no idea any of this is coming. And this is just another way, another example of how these people are going to be left behind. Now, is there some chance that we've gotten all this wrong? I suppose there is, okay? You have to always be open to the possibility that something you believe is wrong. And that includes foundational beliefs. I have been wrong about foundational beliefs before, and I am not committed to the illusion that I will never be wrong again. I would like to not be wrong again. I believe that I try to pursue belief formation in a way that reduces the possibility that I will be wrong about something important in the future, but it is entirely possible, okay? Everyone should realize that it is also entirely possible that we are wrong about Trump, right? We can even ascribe minute possibilities here, but it is the understanding of the possibility that you might be wrong about something important that will keep you humble in your future belief formation. And when you look at an issue that you haven't thoroughly examined, it is what allows me and what will allow you to say, I'm not an expert about that. I haven't spent a lot of time studying and thinking about that particular issue or that aspect of that particular issue. Therefore, I'm going to pursue that issue with humility, and my belief formation will be informed by that humility. And if in the future I realize I was wrong, I will amend my beliefs at that time. But all of that said, we should still be able to charge forward, because the interference, the distortion, the misinformation, various forms of oppression like censorship and propaganda, all of that is going to be confronting us. And if we are hesitant in every step forward to the point where we do not actually take any steps forward, then we're going to be the ones who bear the brunt of that. And so we don't want to find ourselves in those situations. Therefore, it behooves us to continue charging forward, understanding that we may end up making mistakes and important ones. And at that point, we're going to have no other option than to throw up our hands, say, hey, guys, I got this one wrong. I'm going to have to tread back along this path. And that's just the best we can do it as humans, because we are fallible, we are sinners, we are imperfect, and there is no escape from that. Certainly not ultimately aiding in the creation of a false God of the authoritative source that we will then defer all thinking and responsibility to. That's not how it works. It is ultimately our responsibility for how we conduct ourselves in the world, and we will do that to the best of our ability, but there's not a lot else we can do. And I guess Elise says, even though I don't ever push anyone to believe everything I say, I am tired of the attitude from people and wish they would just realize we don't have to agree on everything. And yeah, that's it. I mean, all of you in here probably agree with me about most things and then disagree with me about some things. And I think people often do that the most when they think that I am going too far in my denial of something or my calling out of something as fake. This is not me tooting my own horn, but it is pretty rare where in the future, as a few months pass, people are still having that same problem with the thing I've said as I continue to say it. And there are very few times where people have gotten to the point where they're like, see, all of that was true. So I'm going to keep going at my own pace. And if people don't like that, then, unsubscribe for a while. See if I'm saying something that you align better with in the future. See if your mind changes as we go into the future. A lot of people were very, very angry at me for suggesting a few months ago that we shouldn't be morally required to vote in elections we know to be rigged when no one who we will be voting for has made a good effort or done effective work in making sure those elections aren't rigged. Now, if you want to tell me that Trump is an exception, we can have that conversation. But for the rest of them, there's no exception. I'm not going to vote for anybody who has pretended that Joe Biden is president for the last 3.5 years. And I'm not going to respond kindly to any claims that say I am somehow blackpilling or dooming or being a defeatist when I tell you that there is absolutely no way in hell I'm going to vote for any of these congressmen who have told us that Joe Biden is president. Why would I do that? What have they done that proves to me that they are going to be proper wards of public power? I would never in a million years do that. And so, a lot of people got upset at me about that back in, what was that? Maybe it was January, but it was probably before then when I began saying that. People aren't upset about that viewpoint now. People are like, oh yeah, okay. Well, I'm definitely going to vote, but that's probably right. Why should we be forced to take actions that do not align with us morally, intellectually, or spiritually? I do not believe our country, our society, our world is going to be saved by going in and pushing little buttons on an iPad screen attached to a black box and then waiting nervously at home while the TV tells me what my future is. Fuck that. And if you try to make me feel bad about that, I'm only going to think that you have some deep-seated issues, most likely resulting or as a commitment to the incentive and punishment structure within the party of false decorum, or some remnants of the normie sphere that you haven't been able to remove from your thinking. And hey, that's all good, man. We all go at our own pace, but people aren't mad about it anymore. And what should that tell you? Okay, guys, I'm going to wrap it up there. I hope that this new format works for everybody. I think I'm going to do one of these at this time, 3 p.m. Eastern. The next week, I'll do one at 6 p.m. Eastern. I might make that, 5 or 5:30 Eastern, but I think 6 might work well. And we'll just go back and forth on that. We'll see how this model goes, if it makes sense, and we will take it from there. So thank you all for tuning in. And I guess, you know what? Someone asked, I want to answer this quick because it's quick. Someone asked what the It's High Noon thing and the See You Out on the Range thing was. When I first started doing a daily 5 days a week podcast in August of 2020, I called that podcast High Noon because I would release it every day at or around noontime Pacific time. I continued to shoot for that after I moved out of California. I eventually changed from calling it High Noon and kind of branding around that idea at the beginning of 2022, but I still kept that in there because I find it fun and kind of a little callback, a little throwback, a little flashback, however you want to refer to it, to people who have listened to the podcast since way back then. So that's what that is. That'll probably stay there. I will probably rebrand the podcast in the relatively near future. And that's that. So I will see you guys tomorrow at the same reasonable time on the same reasonable podcast network. I don't have a network. Masks and lockdowns don't work. They lied to you about a pandemic, and Joe Biden obviously will never be president. Goodbye.
In my mind, that's the end game.
If you're listening to this episode for free, you can support me and support the show and the work I do by signing up for a paid subscription at imyourmoderator.substack.com. You can do so for as low as $50 a year or $5 a month. Comes out to under a quarter per episode, and you'll blast right through the paywall for all of the writing. The merch store is www.cancelcouture.com, and you can find everything else by heading to Linktree. Linktree.com/I'm your moderator. And I'll see you soon out on the range. It's happening!